Today, we're going to be taking a look at some of the best vehicles to ram shit with in GTA Online. I tested out a bunch of different vehicles and separated each of them into 3 different categories: bad, subpar, and awesome. So with that said, I hope you enjoy, and let's get into it. Let's start with bad vehicles. Not really the vehicle itself, but the scoop you put on, which is going to be the Mega Blade on any of the Arena War vehicles. Using this thing to ram stuff just isn't the best in the world. If you're driving on the right side of the road and you slowly ease into the rears of other cars, they will get launched in the air. But if you decide to start going a bit faster, you're going to end up spinning out. And if you decide to go into the other side of the road, it's just not going to work out too well for you. So if you want to ram stuff, I would not recommend using the Mega Blade for Arena War vehicles. Next, we have the Insurgent series of vehicles. Back in the day, this was my favorite vehicle to just drive around and ram shit with. But now we got a bunch of other vehicles that are way better at it, and the Insurgent just isn't cutting it anymore. It's still a pretty decent vehicle, but when it comes to ramming, it's definitely not the best. It's pretty much the same story with the Night Shark, but I have to say the Night Shark is a little bit better than the Insurgent series of vehicles. It's not the best in the world, but it is still pretty good, and if you were to buy either the Insurgent or the Night Shark, by any means, for any purpose, I would highly recommend getting the Night Shark over the Insurgent. It's just a much better vehicle to have in free mode. When it comes to ramming, it's not the best, but it's still a pretty awesome vehicle. Next is the Mule Custom. This thing is absolutely terrible. Even though it does have a ramp on the side of it, it is literal garbage. Even driving on the right side of the road, it's terrible. You move to the other side of the road, and it's just not going to do anything. It's literally just going to stop after you hit a couple vehicles. Absolutely terrible. Same thing with the Pounder Custom. Literally identical vehicles when it comes to ramming. They're both just not good, and honestly, I thought they would have been a little bit better, considering the Pounder Custom shares the same scoop that the brocade 6x6 has. So that kind of shocked me a bit, but yeah, I would stay away from these if you're into just ramming a bunch of cars. Taking a look at subpar vehicles now, it's going to be Arena War vehicles with a regular ramp on the front of it. They're actually not too bad, but every once in a while they will end up spinning out. Something like the ZR380 spins out a lot, but other Arena War vehicles like the Dominator, Impaler, Imperator, they're actually pretty decent with this on the front of it and can get through cars pretty easily. But if you cross over to the other side of the road, that's where things change a little bit. It's honestly terrible, and I would not recommend it. But if you're driving on the right side of the road, it's actually pretty decent. You just got to make sure you stay in control of your car, and you'll be pretty much good to go. Then we also have the Brutus. Now, this is somewhat different than those other Arena War vehicles because it doesn't really launch the cars in the sky and throw them around like some other vehicles do. It kind of just pushes them out of the way, and when it starts to get into contact with multiple vehicles at the same time, you will start to lose control on this thing very, very quickly. So it's not the worst in the world, but when it does come to ramming into stuff, there are better vehicles out there. And if you were to hop onto the other side of the highway with this thing, it honestly just gets a lot worse because you're just going to start spinning out like crazy. So, like I said, not terrible, not the best. It's honestly just subpar, which is why it's in this category. Then we have the Sasquatch. This would be one of the best vehicles, but the issue is it's so gigantic. That happens constantly. You'll just pop up on your rear wheels. Sometimes you'll fly up into the air, even going after small little vehicles. And honestly, that's why it's subpar. If you drive slowly, it's actually not the worst thing in the world. But if you drive too quick, you're going to end up flying up into the air and spinning out. And the handling isn't the best either because it is a monster truck, so you are going to be losing control a lot. It is pretty decent at ramming shit though, and will definitely clear the highway. Just don't go too fast, because then, you'll kind of get screwed. Next, we have the Scarab. It's a really fun vehicle to drive around. It's not the best in the world at ramming for a few reasons. One, it's going to be the speed. It's not the fastest. If you're driving on the right side of the road, it's going to take a while for you to catch up with even pedestrians, and then when you finally hit them, they're not going to fly sky high or get flung around like crazy, which does kind of suck. You move on to the other side of the road, and it starts to get a bit more fun, but when you start to come into contact with multiple vehicles, because it is a tank, it's going to end up popping up in the air a tiny bit, and then driving over those vehicles, and then you'll end up flipping over or spinning out, which does kind of suck. This is one of those vehicles where it's just really good to ram with it on the opposite side of the road opposed to the right side of the road, but just don't go too fast or else you're going to end up flying up in the air and spinning out. Next, we have the RCV. There's 2 reasons why it's not in the best of the best category. Number 1 is the speed. It's not fast, and if you're driving on the correct side of the road, well, even if you hit a little panto, it's just going to get pushed out of the way. You're not going to get any vehicles to fly up in the air. You drive onto the other side of the road, and that's where things change a bit, because you'll actually start ramming into them, and it'll be pretty decent until the cars start to pile up a bit. Since the RCV doesn't technically ram them sky high, it just pushes them. You're on the opposite side of the road, they will gain some air, but some vehicles just won't pop up. And after a couple vehicles get in the way, then it's going to end up slowing down a lot. It's not the worst in the world, but it's definitely not the best of the best. Now, we're getting into the best vehicles to ram shit with, in no particular order. Starting off with the Bruiser. This thing is a ton of fun. It literally plows through anything. Even larger vehicles like buses, it will literally just push them straight out of the way. Unlike a lot of the other vehicles we've looked at, they're not able to do that. Plus, the Bruiser can hold its speed. By the way, you're probably wondering why I didn't put the ramp buggy on here. Well, technically, the ramp buggy doesn't ram stuff, it ramps shit. So, I mean, if you want to ramp shit sky high, ramp buggy is fun. But in terms of ramming, these things will pop those vehicles sky high and absolutely obliterate them if they don't fly high up into the air. The Bruiser is a ton of fun, plus it has special Arena War perks like Nitrous, Jump Boost, Shunt Boost, and turrets and mines that you could place on the ground. A ton of fun to use this thing to ram shit with, and I'd highly recommend buying it if you're into that kind of thing. Next up, we have the Phantom Wedge. This thing is a beast. Any small car, SUV, or truck will get plowed right into and then either launched sky high or flown off the side of the road. There's only two issues with this vehicle. Number one is going to be it's not the best at hitting large vehicles. It'll tend to spin out a whole lot when that happens. And then the other issue that you're going to see in a second here is it really likes to pop up in the air. And I don't really know how it does that considering the shape of the ramp on the front of it, but for some reason it tends to do it a lot more than you would think. But either way, it is still a really fun vehicle to ramp shit with, and I've had a ton of fun driving this thing around the city. Next up is the Armored Box File, and I never even considered this vehicle to be good at ramming shit. One of you guys commented on my video saying, yeah, the brocade 6x6 is decent, but the Armored Box File is boss. I can't find the comment, so whoever said that, props to you, because you are right. This thing is amazing. I wouldn't say it's better than the brocade 6x6. I'd say it's like one a little level below it, or maybe even tied with it, because it is actually really, really good, and it's been out for so long, and I've never actually driven around and rammed shit with this thing. But even while I was recording this, I drove all the way up and down this highway multiple times and had an absolute blast. On either side of the road, it kind of just plowed through everything that was in front of it. So if you're considering purchasing a vehicle for ramming stuff with, the box file is honestly pretty decent. Next is the Cerberus. This thing is an absolute beast. Plus, it's an Arena War vehicle, so it does come with extra perks, and it also has a flamethrower on the top of it, which is a lot of fun. So let's say you can't ram one of these vehicles, well, you could just light it on fire and watch it burn. But when it comes to most vehicles, this thing will either launch them sky high, or it'll launch them up in the air, and then they'll start bouncing around off of the Cerberus itself, which is really cool. I bet the NPC in there is probably terrified for their life, and they're most likely going to die after. It's a bunch of fun to drive this thing around, plus, like I said, it is an Arena War vehicle. I just wouldn't recommend putting on the most expensive scoop, because that one is not the best for ramming. I'm using the second last one that you could put on, and that thing works very, very well. Next, we have the brocade 6x6, one of my personal favorites. First off, take a look at this. From a standstill, it just plows through everything with no issues whatsoever, and its speed isn't really affected at all. Even when it comes in contact with large vehicles like buses, which you're going to see in a little bit, it just plows straight through them. As an added bonus, it's also extremely strong. If an Oppressor Mark II decides to pull up, they can unload 20 homing missiles on you, and you're still not going to get killed. They have to go back, get more missiles, come back, and then if they hit every single missile on target, then they will kill you. But it'll take about 38 homing missiles to blow this thing up while you're driving it, which is crazy. But when it comes to ramming into shit, this is the vehicle I tend to use because I think it's a ton of fun and it does the job very, very well. And now when it comes to ramming those big vehicles, like I said earlier, like airport buses, you're going to see here in a second, it just goes through them. You can see the speed doesn't really change. Sometimes it'll launch them sky high, but the best part is, like I said, the speed stays consistent. You're not really dropping too much in speed, which is one huge benefit to this vehicle, and that's why I use it all the time. But like I said, this isn't in any particular order. This is my favorite vehicle to ram with. We all have our preferences, but if you want to ram into shit in GTA Online, these last couple of vehicles we went over are probably your best bets. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching the video. I hope you went on to enjoy it, and with that said, I will catch you guys in the next one.